shot dead in the same incident. Earlier today, I was briefed in my office by Acting Police Commissioner Mike Pennant about the situation. And as I was being briefed, the officer who was shot was being operated on in Waikato Hospital. This is a constable who was out looking after his community, and what's happened is a reminder that police put themselves on the line every time, every day they put on that uniform to keep our community safe. He, his family and colleagues are in my thoughts and the thoughts of all Kiwis. New Zealanders' thoughts, of course, are also with the children involved, and I know the whole country is anxiously waiting to hear that the missing children have been safely found. I doubt there is a New Zealander who has not followed to some extent the story of the abduction of the children, of whom there have been only intermittent sightings since December 2021. Social services are working with police and are on standby to support them. And this morning's events are not how anyone would have wanted this to end, and I know that there will be many questions about it. Police are naturally devastated by what's happened to their colleague, but right now they are out there getting on with the job of finding those missing children. This is a police matter. Various investigations are underway, and you'll fully appreciate I'm somewhat limited in what I can say, but with that I'm happy to take your questions.
Prime Minister, what was your initial reaction when you were being briefed by the Acting Commissioner, and how concerned are you for the children who are still missing?
Yeah, very concerned, like all New Zealanders are. These are children out there that actually we're running out of daylight hours. Police have put surged it with a huge amount of resources into the area. They're doing an incredible job of trying to find these children as quickly as possible. That's obviously a big concern, but also the fallen police officer as well, who is going through obviously some serious surgeries as we talk, given the injuries that he's encountered. So our thoughts are in both those spaces.
Have the Defence Force been asked to
Sorry?
Have the Defence Force been asked to help with the search?
I'm not aware of that, and I couldn't comment on that, no.
How serious the head injuries are of the police officer? What kind of injuries did he sustain?
No, I'm aware, like you are, of that will have a series of surgeries, as Jill Rogers outlined earlier today as well.
Will he make a full recovery?
Again, I know he's in surgery at the moment.
The situation has been going on for years. How confident are you in the way that the police handled this entire operation?
Well, look, I think there will be a series of questions to ask in due course, but today just isn't that day. Today is a day where we are, thinking and praying for a fallen police colleague. We are also making sure that those children can be found as quickly and as safely as possible, and really that's the focus of the police. And the police are out there right now doing a full-on job, trying to find those children as quickly as possible.
So there's a series of questions to be asked.
Sorry?
You say that there's a series of questions to be asked. Do you have some level of doubt over whether police handled the situation completely up to standard?
Look, again, there'll be a series of inquiries and investigations that need to, that will get underway, post this event. But for right now, we need the police focused on everything that they're doing, which is finding those children.
Is there
They have any idea?
Sorry, is there an escalation plan should the children not be found in the next 24 hours?
Again, those are operational matters for police. As you've seen, they've got all the resources, they've pulled all their teams down into the area, and they're working incredibly hard to find those kids.
Do they have any idea where the kids might be?
Well, I think you heard Jill Rogers at 3:30 say they've got some general vicinity of areas that they're exploring, but I can't comment on that. I haven't had full operational detail of any further insight. No.
There's a few areas that we're looking at that we're pretty confident they don't actually know.
No, I haven't been informed of that, no.
Is there any consideration to offer some kind of reward for members of the public that may provide information towards the finding of those missing children?
Yeah, look, again, they're operational matters for police. I'm conscious that I think there have been rewards in the past, year or so offered out to the community. And again, I don't want to get ahead of them. I'll let them talk to those issues.
How often were you being briefed on this situation?
Well, this morning my team was obviously briefed just before 6 a.m. I found out I was briefed also around just after that time at 6 o'clock. I've met with Acting Commissioner Pennant, as I said, when I came to Wellington, and I've also spoken with Police Minister Mark Mitchell as well, and my office has been in constant contact with police, obviously, since the events of the early this morning.
What's your understanding of how often Mark Mitchell was being briefed? Obviously, it was a situation that had been, an operation that had been underway for years. How often was the Minister of Police being briefed on this, and, was that ever relayed to you and at what points?
I can't speak to that. It's an operational issue. Obviously, this whole investigation, over the last few years with police, that's something that they're in charge of those operational matters. And again, I can't give you the detail on the briefings that they may have had with the minister or not.
Prime Minister, on another topic, the latest...
Sorry, should we just finish off the police? Are there any other police?
Clarify then.
Sorry.
You did mention, Prime Minister, that there'd be a series of investigations or inquiries. Do you have an idea of what sort of investigations or inquiries we might expect to come out of this?
No, just acknowledging there'll be various inquiries underway and, frankly, many questions still to be answered. But for right here, right now, we need our police focused on finding those children and supporting the colleague that's been injured.
And just a final question on that. You did call Tom Phillips in your opening a fugitive. Is it acceptable in a country like New Zealand that we would have a fugitive be in the bush for almost 4 years with children?
Well, again, there are various inquiries, as I said, will be underway. And in fairness, we need the police to be focused today on finding children and caring for their colleague.
How do you think it reflects on New Zealand? It's been international news. It's been all over the show. How do you think something like this happening in New Zealand, what does it say about you?
Well, look, it's a sad and absolutely tragic event. This is not what anybody wanted to happen today. And I think that is, a consistent feeling from everybody across New Zealand. We are used to seeing these stories from other parts of the world, but not here in New Zealand. And it's certainly a very sad and tragic day.
Have we as a country let those children down?
Again, I'm not going to comment or speculate on that. I think today is a day where we really want our police focused on finding those children and caring for their colleague.
Prime Minister, the latest
do you have full confidence in the way that police have handled the situation?
Well, again, as I said, there will be a series of inquiries and investigations underway.
Express full confidence.
Well, again, what I'm observing is I'm observing a police force that's out there now that's been up since 2:30 this morning, from top to bottom, that is doing everything it can to find children today, and that's really what I want them focused on, and that's what I want them supported in.
The latest Taxpayers Union poll shows that National is still behind Labour, but it has made a gain. Are you confident that you're getting the message through to New Zealanders that the economy is showing signs of improvement? What's your reaction to
Well,
it?
again, as I've said before, there's so many polls. I don't comment on polls. I was elected to do a job back in 2023. There'll be another election next year. As I said, I'm focused on what New Zealanders need to be focused on, and the message is pretty clear. It's about the economy. As I've said before, we've inherited a huge recession, probably the worst we've had in 35 years. We've had a massive hangover with COVID, thanks to poor economic management and with mismanagement of the previous administration. And importantly, we've also been knocked around with tariffs, as have many other countries around the world. But I think it's also a two-speed recovery. I was in Christchurch just recently in the last 2 weeks, and I can tell you in Christchurch, South Island and rural communities and the primary industry sectors, actually they're feeling the real benefits of growth. Even in Auckland, it's a bit mixed. There's no doubt about it, Auckland has done it tougher with respect to manufacturing and construction. But even just in the last few weeks, you're seeing a huge intensity of activity underway in Auckland. Think about the $7 billion worth of infrastructure projects we've got going before Christmas, much of that in Auckland. Think about the projects above the CRL, 10 or 12 of them that are kicking off, the fast track approval that we got for the wharves, the fact that someone like Halter, raised $165 million and has 107 vacancies in that company, the investor work that we've seen coming in with active investor visas, and obviously the key thing is we also still have 40% or just over 40% of New Zealanders that haven't yet refixed or financed their mortgages, and when they get the benefit of those lower interest rates, that's money that goes straight into their back pocket.
Are you glad to see that you've had a bump in terms of...
Again, I just don't... I'm focused. I was elected to do a job, and I know what my job is, which is to clean up the mess, turn it around, and get it heading in the right direction, and that's what I'm focused on. And I know that's... there's so many different things coming. That's what my day is. That's what I'm focused on from beginning to end.
You must be happy that you've gone up in the preferred Prime Minister.
Look, guys, I honestly don't... If you seriously think I'm thinking about that stuff, when we've got some serious issues to deal with in New Zealand and to get this economy moving so that people actually feel there's a more positive future for them, that's what I'm fixated on.
There's been a lot of speculation, though, about your leadership and your future. Have you felt any need to go and speak to your backbench or check in with your caucus about how they're feeling?
None whatsoever.
So you haven't gone and talked to them about,
Absolutely
do you
not.
still want me to be your leader?
Yeah, absolutely not. We know exactly what we're doing. We've got a tight team. You've seen me come through politics, fix up the National Party, find a way to win an election, form a coalition, focus on the New Zealand people, get the show turned around so they can realise all the great potential that's in it.
You don't see any cracks in your party?
No, none whatsoever.
Your coalition partners are being a lot more vocal in criticising you just over the weekend. New Zealand First criticising what National's been doing on the economy, talking about pulling out of the Paris Agreement. Your former National MP now joining New Zealand First. Is the relationship between the two parties?
Oh, I think there's a very strong relationship. But National New Zealand First, National Act. I think you've seen a government that's been giving you strong and stable government in the first three-party coalition. We have four-party coalition sitting in Western Europe in an MMP system. I'm very, very proud of actually how our coalition is working. I didn't take those remarks that way at all over the weekend.
How it's okay for everyone to view their views in public. Previous political leaders have not done that. They prefer to keep things, locked down. Do you think that is what is having an impact?
No, what you saw on the weekend was a New Zealand First party conference, right? And what I lead is the coalition government, and each individual parties, as we head to an election, will start to build out their election manifesto with their own ideas. There are 6 different political parties in the system here represented in Parliament today. That's quite normal. That's quite okay. But what I'm saying to you is, as a coalition government, we are very focused on actually rebuilding the economy, making sure we restore law and order, deliver better health and education. And we're very united on that, and we have been right from day one. That's what's brought these 3 parties together, because that's where our common interest really lies. And so, we are focused on delivering that each and every quarter, and that's very deliberate.
At that New Zealand First conference, though, you had a former National MP and a former Labour MP both show up. What is it about the 2 major parties that are turning off former MPs, that are driving them to New Zealand First?
Well, I'll just say, I'm very, you'd have to ask the members, those people, Stuart Nash and Horetia Pango, as to why they've made those decisions. That's up to them, but I wish them both very well.
Do you look forward to working with Stuart Nash when he's Parliament after next election?
I didn't. That'll be a question for Winston Peters and Stuart Nash, whether he's in there or not there.
Would Stuart Nash ever be welcome in a cabinet you led?
I personally have worked with him in the past in my former life, and I found him good to work with.
You also said there needed to be an inquiry.
Sorry?
You also said there needed to be an inquiry after he was sacked from cabinet for breaching confidentiality.
Yeah, sure, but again, I'll make it work in terms of we make coalitions work, as you've seen us do it with the 2 parties that we've partnered with in this government, and we've enjoyed working with both of them. But for now, parties will build out their election policies as they go into the campaign next year, and that's to be expected. It doesn't mean that that's government policy.
Do you think there's merit in New Zealand First policy to increase KiwiSaver contributions even more than your government has?
Well, look, as you know, we're open to it because we've stepped it up from 3 to 4%. But as I said this morning, there's a number of considerations. You've got to think about what it means for base pay, what it means for pay rises, how affordable is it for small businesses. What you'd hate to see is an 8 to 10% pay cut for people as that's funded. And so there's a lot of considerations to work your way through. And frankly, there's also a lot of detailed costings that need to be prepared as part of election manifestos, which I'm sure will be built out in due course.
What did you make of New Zealand First making that announcement without any of those costings or details?
Well, that's up to them. It's they're their own political party, and it's their political party conference, and so that's for them to make decisions.
If Labour was to announce their tax policy in a few weeks and have absolutely no costings,
do you think they will?
Details,
Think that Labour will announce a tax policy?
If they were,
capital gains, wealth tax, inheritance tax, trust tax.
If they didn't have those details, wouldn't you criticise them?
Well, sorry, it's the opposition. What you've got is a party that's it's putting its ideas out there for an election campaign next year.
It's on your side of the things, but when it's the opposition, you
criticise
them?
I'd just say to you, I think, when I look at the results that we saw over the by-election over the course of the weekend, I'd just say to you, part of the conversation is there was no policy from Labour, and I think that's partly why they did so poorly.
If it was to put forward a policy with no details, you wouldn't criticise them for that?
I would expect the opposition to be held to account for the proposals that they're going to put forward. And again, as I said to you, my challenge back on the New Zealand First proposal is, there's a lot more detail that needs to be seen, and a lot more costings that need to be delivered. But I said to you, I was open for the idea of expanding it, but I'm just giving you the reality of the considerations we had to go through as a government, even when we moved from 3 to 4%.
It would probably be around 12 billion, at least, the very bottom amount to pay for.
It's good to see you again. Welcome back.
Thank you. About 12 billion at the very bottom end to pay for those tax cuts that have been needed. Is that the kind of money that the books are going to have next year?
Look, again, each party's going to have its superannuation policy as it goes into an election campaign. That's the time for us to look at it and compare ideas and make our case to the New Zealand people. But until I see detailed costings and further details, not much I can comment on, apart from just give you my observations as I saw it.
Thomas?
You also said Stuart Nash should leave Parliament entirely after he was sacked from Cabinet. Would you welcome him even back in the building as an MP?
Well, again, those are decisions for Stuart Nash and for New Zealand First. Yep.
But he might be voting for your government. He might be sitting around the Cabinet table with you. How can you trust
That's a
him?
lot of hypotheticals there, Thomas. Let's just see
You
what happens.
suggested you could make it work, that you could potentially work with him again.
I've made it work with other parties. As you've seen, we've put a three-party coalition together, first time in New Zealand's history. We've worked very constructively together, and we'll continue to do so.
Happy to work with a cabinet minister who broke the cabinet rules.
I'm sure he's I'm sure he's learned his lesson. Yeah.
You dropped the standards of cabinet to allow.
Sorry?
You dropped the standards of cabinet to allow him to.
No. You know what's going on here. This is a candidate, a person who's not even yet confirmed as a New Zealand First candidate. That's going to be a decision, obviously, for the party and for Winston Peters. So it's purely speculative and hypothetical.
Just on current government policy, is your standalone major events fund going to have $5 million in it or $10 million?
Again, we'll have more to say about that very shortly. It's not a surprise that I've said that I want to expand the major events funding. I think it's really important that we are competitive, that we're able to attract major events to New Zealand. I think it's really important for economic activity, economic development, regional economic development. So we'll have more to say about that very shortly.
Council's expected to tip into it.
Again, I'm not going to. We'll talk about that when we have the policy to share with you, which will be shortly.
What are you expecting will be the main issues come Pacific Islands Forum?
Look, I think there's obviously been conversation about the absence of dialogue partners being present in the PIF this year. We advocated very strongly, as you know, through Minister Peters and in our own position, which is to keep the status quo. That the dialogue partners being there is actually a good opportunity to engage with them, particularly on development opportunities across the Pacific. Having said all of that, there is very good unity within the Pacific Island Forum, and so it's a chance for us to think a little bit more about how the organisation matures and also how it actually can engage those dialogue partners in a constructive way, because there's been a lot of them that's come into the Pacific Islands in recent years. And so I think it's just about the maturing of PIF, the continued unity of it, and the centrality of PIF really for our part of the world.
Is New Zealand now to secure any particular meetings with any specific members?
I'll be engaging with all members, frankly, over that period of time, and while I'm there for the 2 days. And also we'll be making the case that we'd love to host PIF in 2027 here in New Zealand as well.
Bilaterals at this stage?
No, not at this stage, but it'll be... the great thing about PIF is that there's a full day of just leaders only, without officials, without advisors around, and as a result that's a really great way to build relationship and to have conversations with leaders as you need to.
Will you be looking to seek out Mark Brown and have a discussion?
Oh, I'm sure we'll have a good engagement, yep.
What do you plan to say to him?
Oh, look, again, that we'll have a good engagement. Our officials are working through, the risk areas that we see in those documents. That's ongoing work, but I'm sure we'll have a very civil and constructive engagement.
You often talked about the New Zealand economy being
Sorry, mate?
You often talked about the New Zealand economy being a two-speed economy.
Yeah.
What we see in the cities versus what we see in the regions. But what we're seeing in Nelson at the moment, where you've seen a number of jobs on the line, Sealord announcing that could be a closure of its factory. I mean, what do you have to say about that? That's an economy that relies on the primary industries.
Yeah, incredibly. Yeah, look, incredibly difficult time for people that are impacted in those organisations, no doubt about it. Across New Zealand, what you've seen is some companies have had fantastic years and they've done incredibly well. Other businesses have not done well, and there are two examples, as you've just highlighted. The challenge is then, the next question that you asked me is why won't the government do something about it? And the reality is that the government can't bail out every failing business across New Zealand. That's not what Kiwis would reasonably expect, because it's ultimately not free. Kiwis end up having to pay for that by us expanding further our debt, which has already gone up 3 times under the last administration. It's costing us $10 billion a year just in interest payments. So that's not a free ticket or a free cheque to write as well. So our job is to make sure that we create the conditions for growth, and then businesses can create those opportunities. And so even if companies are struggling and failing, that there are opportunities in other parts of the economy. As I said, and I can think about Halter, for example, in Auckland. That is a agri-tech business that has raised a huge amount of capital and has a number of vacant jobs at the moment. Those are the kinds of things that we've got to work hard at to make sure that we create the conditions for growth, but the growth is actually created by the businesses themselves.
Can you not do anything to change the conditions on the ground for these kinds of businesses in the regions? You know, you had your Shane Jones on the weekend warning of rust belts being created in New Zealand if the government did not make more positive intervention for regional New Zealand. You know, is there nothing you can do to change?
Well, we have a $1.2 billion regional infrastructure fund, which Minister Jones is responsible for deploying across the regions for exactly that purpose. And so there is plenty of capital put aside to make sure that we are strengthening in our regions as much as we possibly can. The other thing that we can do is make it easier for people to get permission to do things. You know, we have seen a number of business ventures in the south, deep south, for example, turned down, whether it's wind or whether it's been aquaculture projects, where everyone said no and nobody said yes. Well, we can change those regulatory settings as we have been doing with RMA reform. We're doing some pretty big things in this government. We're doing serious RMA reform, which no one has touched. We're doing serious educational reform, which no one has touched. We're actually making sure that we crank up foreign investment and investment in general and understand the impact that that has on jobs, and obviously we're having a big effort on trade as well.
What changes has the government made to the regulatory standards bill?
Sorry, the regulatory standards bill. That will come forward, as you know, as a piece of legislation to make sure that we, are putting that through. But our intention is to make sure that we've got a very sensible piece of legislation that leads to a better quality piece of regulations and legislation being developed into the future. That's the point and purpose of that bill.
Your government, your coalition government, your cabinet has signed off on changes since it's been before the select committee. You did that with the fast track bill. You came out and publicly announced what those changes were. Are you going to do the same thing?
You'll see it when it comes back into the House.
So we have to wait until after that select committee.
Yes, you'll see it when it comes back after the.
Earlier, there has been so much conversation and focus on this piece of legislation. Why not sooner?
Well, again, we've gone through a process where we've had select committee feedback. As a cabinet, we'll make a decision, and then when the legislation is changed and is brought into the House, that's when we'll talk about any changes or tweaks that we've made.
What's the rationale?
Sorry?
That's the process we're following, but what's the rationale as to why you won't make that information public before it gets into the House?
Well, it's going to be coming into the House, so it's that's the point, that it logically makes a sense for us to talk about it in much the same way we talked about changes that we made constantly to the fast track legislation, and we'll continue to do so going forward as well.
To Laura's point, you announced that detail before you brought it back.
No, not always. We had a lot of amendments and things that were happening as the bill went through the House as well, on fast track as it will be on here.
Sorry, Thomas. On that $8.4 billion figure in the Treasury paper last week, that was on top of, I think, forecast $19 billion in cuts. At what point do you start to think we need to stop cutting to get to fiscal sustainability and start taxing? Because that $8.4 billion figure on top of $19 billion in cuts is quite a big one.
Well, again, what you're seeing there with the release of the OIA and those papers is actually that was the combined wish list of every government agency and what it would like to spend money on. We are a responsible government, and of course we said no to a number of things. That's what you would expect us to do. We have to make those trade-offs as a result of that. What we're focused on is making sure spending gets into the programs that are working, and we're very comfortable reprioritising and making savings and making sure we get value for money for that spend and that it's deployed to the frontline services. You've seen that, for example, in healthcare expenditure. You've seen that with respect to learning coordinators, across and education in general. You've seen it with respect to defence. So we'll continue the work of reprioritisation and savings. That should just be daily, ongoing practice of government. But equally, our focus is also on growing the economy fast.
There was a Treasury paper that you guys got last year, and it was released earlier this year, that said that you wouldn't be able to maintain existing health and education services if you were to pursue that 30% of GDP spending target. That something would have to give eventually, and it would be service quality or service coverage. Do you just think Treasury's wrong on that, and that we'll be able to get to the end of the decade, you'll reduce spending, but public services will be broadly the same quality and quantity as they are now?
No, we think we can get much more efficiency in our public services and better quality delivery as well. And so that is just relentless daily practice of continuous improvement and getting better and making sure that every dollar is deployed in the optimal way. And just because it's previously been spent in one way doesn't mean that it gets the same return or bang for that buck. And so we'll keep doing that. It's a different way of thinking than how maybe previous governments have run, but it's the way that we should be thinking because it's taxpayers' money.
By the end of the decade, you'll be able to spend less as a share of the economy on these public services, but the coverage will be the same as it is now or better, and the quality will be the same as it is now or better.
It's as simple as making sure every dollar we spend is appropriately designed to get a return, and it's equally determined upon us wanting to grow this economy and to accelerate growth in the economy. And the consequence of those two things will be what we end up with.
Okay. Back on regional economy issues, I mean, when Jones talks about managerialism over intervention, which is broadly seen as a commentary on the way you sort of manage politics compared to what he wants, you know, and you talk about the regional infrastructure fund, are you basically saying to him, actually, you have the tools, mate, get on with it?
No, I'm just saying to you, we've got a $1.2 billion regional infrastructure fund that's designed and has been used and will be continue to be deployed across regions where we need to see strengthening happening. A lot of it we can change around regulatory settings to make it easier to get things done and to start, you know, to for business to get on with things. But equally, you know, we've got $1.2 billion we've put into a regional infrastructure fund for that reason.
Prime Minister, has Cabinet reached a decision on whether or not to recognise Palestine as a state?
No, not at this point. We will have more to say about that in due course.
Made a decision about methane emissions and the Paris Agreement?
Not at this point, but we'll have more to say about that very shortly.
Is the government going to introduce a Kiwi values pledge for new citizens?
Look, we already have a citizen's oath when you become a citizen in New Zealand. I would just say I think our immigrants have added a tremendous amount to New Zealand. I think New Zealand is a much better place economically, culturally, socially because of it. We have had a smart immigration policy. It is very strongly linked to our economic agenda about bringing in skilled people that we need to make our economy work. I think that's why under successive governments the social licence for immigration has actually been very strong in New Zealand. We don't have the situation that we observe internationally in the UK, Western Europe and the US with large influxes of illegal immigration and refugees, and I think, you know, we have managed it well and consistently over a number of years.
Why is the Internal Affairs Minister looking to introduce that pledge then, and it's been discussed by New Zealand First as well?
Well, that's something that hasn't come to Cabinet, and so, yeah, it may well do, but I'm just saying to you, what I'm saying to you is that, you know, there's an oath for citizenship for New Zealanders. I'd say the vast majority of our immigrants are incredibly proud of being here. The fact that they've left their homelands, their language, their culture, their friends, their family, their loved ones, come to New Zealand to make a better life for themselves, their family and their community is pretty inspiring example.
Is the Minister using her department for ACT Party policy planning?
Well, I wouldn't read into that. I haven't seen something come. We haven't had a discussion. Nothing's come to Cabinet. So until something does, I'll respond to it then.
Should they stop working on it?
Well, ministers have their agencies working on a range of different things at different times.
Them spending their time and the resource working on something that you clearly don't support?
Well, I'm just saying to you, we already have an oath of citizenship, and you know. That's not something that's come to us for consideration or discussion as a Cabinet.
If she brings it to the Cabinet table, are you going to rule it out?
Well, hypothetical. Let's see what happens first.
The point that Auckland businesses were making, though?
Sorry?
Doesn't this go to the point that Auckland businesses were making, that the government is wasting a lot of time on things that aren't actually that important?
I disagree. I disagree completely. This is a government, we spend most of our time talking about how do we get $7 billion worth of infrastructure started before Christmas. How can we accelerate renewals and maintenance programs across the business, you know, across government? How do we actually do educational reform that actually sets our kids up to a great future? RMA reform. Those are where the big focus of time is spent discussing these things.
Minister working on a value statement that you've basically said is not going to be a goer at Cabinet, so isn't that a waste of everyone's time?
I'd just say to you, what this government works on is the core priorities of growing our economy, restoring law and order, better health and education. That's where most of the time spent. That's where most of the energy is spent. Okay, last question. Right. Sorry, Jamie.
You've just spoken extensively about getting value for dollar, about the public service. The public service is now working on something that you clearly don't support. How does that work?
Well, again, ministers will build up, will do work on things that then are taken to cabinet, and then there is a cabinet conversation, a cabinet decision that's made. That's a normal process. That's quite acceptable to do that. Ministers will take advice on a range of issues. It doesn't mean that it always becomes, government policy or government law as a result of that.
You would expect to see a policy then, whereas when it comes to cabinet, you wouldn't have a policy discussion before then to make sure that resources were being used in the most efficient way.
There are on the big topics of how we grow our economy, how we restore law and order, deliver better health and education. There's obviously work that goes on big policy items. On smaller things, that's when ministers will actually bring proposals forward through cabinet committees as per normal. Okay, team, thanks so much. Sorry, last question, Lloyd, then we've got to go. Sorry, mate.
Can I get your thoughts on the Tamaki Makaurau by-election? Firstly, your thoughts on the outcome, and secondly, Te Pāti Māori sort of had some questionable behaviour over the course of that by-election. Do you think Labour needs to make a decision and tell the public whether or not they would work in government with Te Pāti Māori?
Look, I mean, those are decisions for them, but I just say I was a bit surprised by the result. I think I'd said to you all that I thought Labour would, have a stonking win, and they didn't. It was 2-1 in favour of Te Pāti Māori. The fact that the Labour machine managed to raise 3,000 votes out of potentially 60,000 plus sort of voters in that register in that area, in that electorate, speaks volumes, I think. I thought it was a bit unusual, I'll be personal about it, that I thought Chris Hipkins wasn't there on Saturday night with Penny Henare, supporting him and his team. But equally, they haven't had any policies. And so, there's nothing compelling to say to New Zealanders what they're going to do differently apart from tax more, spend more, borrow more. And I think the takeaway from that by-election result is that Te Pāti Māori will have huge influence on the Labour Party. And when you think about Chris Hipkins sitting down with Marama or Chloe and Rari and Debbie, that's going to be quite an interesting set of conversations around a cabinet table if that was ever to happen. All right, thanks team, appreciate it.